All right, me and Stephanie are here. Thank you, Stephanie, for coming. I really appreciate it. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I'm guessing we'll have a few more join us as we continue on here. Stephanie had a really good, great question. She said, "Hey, can you tell me more about what happens next with this social venture pitch?" And I actually had an email. I actually had an email from a student that's one of our students in the class that said, "Hey, what am I supposed to be picking here? Like, how am I supposed to pick something to work on? Can you help me out with that?" And I thought, well, that's great. So Stephanie's joining me live, and I know so many of us are watching the recording, and that's perfectly cool. But let's start right here. I'm going to go start by sharing my screen here, and I'm going to go right to the. So thank you for tuning in. And I'm going to go right to sharing Google Chrome. Let's go to Chrome. Okay, so here we are with Google Chrome. And with Google Chrome, you can see, remember, the whole class is organized by the modules page. And if you go from the very beginning to where we are now, the modules page starts with our orientation and we introduced ourselves. From that, we took a look at this social venture feasibility guideline and rubric. Okay, the guideline tells you all the questions I need you to answer. The rubric tells you how to answer all the questions that I'm asking. Okay. So if we were to take a quick look here at the guidelines, and this is very important because this is the thing that you're going to be basing your social venture pitch on. Okay. Social venture pitch is going to be for the thing that you're going to do your social venture feasibility study on. Okay. And the guidelines have all the questions. Okay. So what's the venture name? What's your name and how can you be contacted? Or names if there's more than one of you working on it, your address, your phone, your fax. If you don't have a fax, nobody has a fax anymore. If you have a logo, that asks the question. So this we'll just do section one. All the sections are in here. Section three and four and five, all the way straight through to the end. And the financial section, which is what we're going to start working on next. Here's the part that's really important about this and what differentiates this from what you would call a normal business plan. At the end of this whole thing, you say, hey, section 11. So you laid this whole thing out. Is it feasible? Can you really do this? But that's okay if it's not. Okay. Like it's not, this is not a class where we're going to grade anybody on if your plan is feasible. It's filling out the questionnaire. So here it is it venture feasible? And if it's not feasible, what would need to change to make it feasible? Are there specific market conditions or any of those kinds of things? What are the strengths and weaknesses? Now you'll notice that's the guideline. The rubric, which tells you how to answer those questions in the guideline, are explains it. So okay, so for instance, the cover page, I just showed you the cover page. Let's say that was out of 5 points. If you met expectations, you probably got 4 out of 5 points. Okay. If you exceeded expectations, you got 5 out of 5 points. So, meeting expectations, you addressed the questions in part one. You had your team member names. You had some contact information. If you exceeded expectations, you did it all. You had the venture name, you had contact information, you had your logo, and it was visually appealing. If we were to zoom on down here towards the end, and I won't go through this thing step by step right now, but we will, and we already have gone through a bunch of the stuff, and you'll see a bunch of the stuff is all in here. So like the pain grid and the startup members, the startup network, all that stuff goes in here, okay? But just to go to the feasibility section, okay, which is out of 15 points, if you wanted, let's say 10, 11 points out of 12 points out of the 15, you met expectations. You addressed the questions. The feasibility was logical. You stated the reasons behind it. They were supported by evidence. And if it wasn't feasible, you demonstrated that you did some research to actually back this thing up. If you wanted to exceed, if you want all 15 out of 15 points, you thoroughly addressed the questions. The feasibility was not only logical, but it's a feasibility decision is a logical conclusion to information presented up to this point. It stated the reasons behind the feasibility decision. They were well supported by evidence, actual evidence. What does that mean? Same thing here. If the project's not feasible, it demonstrates that research backs up the conclusion and that the team tried to find creative solutions to make the project feasible based on from class examples. So what does that mean? If you want to exceed expectations, you're gonna need to do a lot more than AI. Because I don't unless you have AI taking this class, which I don't know how you are, you have to use in class from class examples, right? So you would say, like Freitag, we tried this, this, and this. Or you might say, thinking about WD-40, maybe this is our 39th attempt in the 40th one, because those were things we talked about in the class. Gives recommendations to ameliorate the weaknesses, gives suggestions to improve the probability of success. Now, why am I giving you this right now? Well, we already kind of went over this in the very beginning, but I want to bring it in now because we're doing that. So then, after we did that, we spent some time thinking about ourselves. Entrepreneurial discovery exercise. We what are we good at? What have we been good at in the past, et cetera, et cetera. Um, the next thing was we did a personal value pitch just based on what we were good at. We pitched ourselves for hire for some skill that we were good at. The next thing we got practiced on our log lines. How do you say things real quick so that everybody understands what you're talking about? We tightened up the communication process. Then we said, okay, look, we're going to explore an innovation. Okay. And this exploring innovation, let's read this from the top. It says, pick a socially beneficial product. What does that mean? What does socially beneficial mean? Is a flight school socially beneficial? I think it is. Is a cupcake making company socially beneficial? I believe that it is. Is an event planning company socially beneficial? I believe that it is. Is a prostitution ring socially beneficial? I'm going to say probably not. Okay. Is a drug cartel a socially beneficial organization? I'm going to say no, not so much. No, definitely not. So as long as you're doing something beneficial, do you have to be a not-for-profit? Absolutely not. I don't think you should be a not-for-profit. In fact, I think that's the whole point of the book that we've been reading in the class. So if you're going to do this thing, you're going to do something, I want you to have looked it up first, okay? You're going to use the thing that you're going to pitch to the class for your social venture pitch, and you're going to look it up. You're going to spend some time. You're going to use your resources. You want to use Google, use Google. If you don't want to use Google, guess what? You don't need to because guess what you have right here? You have a library. And this library is fantastic. We're going to talk a little bit about this right now because if you want to get started, this library is dedicated to us, our minor, okay? Our minor and also the major. Entrepreneurship and innovation minor, okay? This whole library is dedicated to you. If you don't know where to start, all you have to do is click on Ask a Librarian. You'll go right to Sarah, who's a real good friend of ours. She'll help you out. She'll put you in the right directions. If you're like, you know what, I pretty much already know what I kind of want to do, here's a great place to start to get a general idea of your industry, of your market. IBIS World is a fantastic one. It's so easy. You just click on it and you put the general, what you want to work on idea in the search box, okay? And it'll tell you everybody that's in the industry, who the participants in the industry are, what markets there are, who the leaders are, where it's going, all the trends. So I can go start right here. As simple as this. Let's say I want to start an event planning company, event planning. Okay, one of our students is doing an event planning company. Great. Okay, ready? Click. Wait, now it said George B. Johnson Company. I said event planning. How did it switch that out? Now, wait a second. Hold on. Well, who is George P. Johnson? What is this business? Private company? Oh, look at this. They're a company that does trade show and event planning. They're a market participant. Ha ha. Here's the CEO. Here's their website. What kind of stuff are they in? Is it getting bigger, smaller? What kind of trade show market share is there? Very interesting. Now I could go back because that was a little more specific than I wanted. I wanted a little bit more general. But wow, look at all the information you can find about that company. Let's try event planning uh companies. Oh, there, wait, here, right at the top. There you go. Trade show and event planning. Here we go. All right. And it's thinking. Here it goes. Okay. Well, now imagine that. COVID-19 had some significant downturn in the trade shows. You think? How big is the industry? How does it segment? Who are the segments? What is a segment? What's the strengths and what's the weaknesses? This is essentially your entire industry section of your feasibility study and a significant portion of your market section. Okay. All the information you need is actually in here now. And that's just one of the resources. There's multiples. Mintel is fantastic. Merchant Intellect, fantastic. These are just rounded up just for you. And you say to yourself, well, Brad, uh, that sounds really easy. What else do I need to do? Well, let's talk about some of this stuff and we'll get into it. But before we finish that, so what did we do? We spent some time looking up in the library the thing we think we're going to do a social venture on. We also already talked about our startup network analysis, right? We already started talking about that. And we said we're going to take our original one and we're going to change it a little bit. Okay. This is how you do it. Okay. We're going to change it a little bit. This was the original one. We said we're going to do a personal one for ourselves that we were not going to hand in. But we said once we get that group together, you know what we're going to do? This is what we're going to do. Once we have our startup network, we're going to cold herd. We're going to take the people out that don't care about our business. They only really cared about us personally. And you're going to hand that in. That's going to get handed in your financial, in your feasibility stuff. All right. Then what's next? Stephanie, what do you think is next? We're going to go to this one called the social venture pitch. Are you ready for this? Here it comes. Using all the skills you developed. So, in other words, hopefully you used looking at your own personal skill set as something you thought would be something you could bring to the table for your social venture project, right? So, if you were really good at event planning, and that's a good thing. And then you thought, I could actually turn that into an actual company. And then you spent some time looking in the library about how event planning started. And then you put together your actual little business plan here. Who do you know that you could sell event planning to, like companies and stuff like that? And it says, okay, here's your social venture pitch. You ready? Using all the skills you've developed here and from past experience and the information you learned from exploring innovation exercise, contrive and execute a 1 minute video pitch to your fellow classmates that you would like to do for the rest of the year, the rest of the semester. Why you think you could actually, seriously, actually pull off a company like this, and why you'd want to, and why they'd want to join you, maybe as a potential customer or as a potential supplier, or maybe join you also and just join your company. And instead of just being you, it could be you and somebody else. It doesn't matter because you know what? Anywhere between only one to as many as five students could evolve based on this assignment. Now, the next thing that happens is we're going to actually come up with a company plan and we're going to come up with our own pain grid. Now, I'm not going to go over that till next week, okay? Because that's not due till March 16th. So you have plenty of time for that. Okay, but we're going to actually come up with a detailed plan for how we're going to make this actually occur. We're going to talk about how we're going to get started, how we're going to make decisions for ourselves. If there's more than one member, who would those be, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So we're going to build. This is like a building block class, as I mentioned. Now, Stephanie, are you still with me? Does this raise more questions or answer any of the questions that you had?
No, it answers a lot of the questions. My questions were around the type of business and what you would consider to be socially beneficial. So I
So
think you covered that.
yeah, like basically anything that would be considered crime, amoral, that clearly has victims involved. I would say those would be the things you'd want to stay away from. Um, Guns, stay away from those, because because really, do we have to do that? You know what I mean? Like, yeah, hate groups. I did actually have a student one time say, "I'm gonna steal pharmaceuticals and start a street pharmaceutical company." And I had to say, "No, no, please, no, 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 please don't do that." Okay, anything that you think would get me almost immediately fired, let's stray away from those. Pornography, strip clubs, anything that would basically get Brad fired. Okay, so does that make sense? So anything. So throw something out at me, Stephanie, and we'll yay or nay it right here and right now. Throw me some ideas.
Well, I have a business idea that's kind of helping women of a certain age with personal styling and personal like shopping.
Fantastic. That's
Is
a
that
very social.
okay?
Are you kidding? How could you? I could think
Okay.
of a better, more social thing to do. That's awesome. Do it. Sold.
Okay. Got it.
I love it. Okay. Okay. So those of us who are watching this video, if you have questions and you're like, I'm not really sure if this is a socially beneficial thing, it probably is. Okay. But shoot me an email. Shoot me an email. Say, hey, Brad, do you consider this socially? And I'll be like, yeah, sounds good to me. I mean, like I said, a flight school, I think is here. Let me give you another one. All right. Let me give you. All right. So I'm going to switch over here, and I'm going to share my little PowerPointy that I have here. This one, have Stephanie, have you ever heard of this company? Continue to share. Have you ever heard of Oakley?
Of course.
Would you consider Oakley socially beneficial? I mean, they make sunglasses, they make pads for bicycle riding, and they make skiing things. That helps society, doesn't it?
Yes.
Okay, so that would be perfectly good. In fact, one of my all-time favorite entrepreneurs of all time. When I do you do you know the story of Oakley? Do you know where the name Oakley came from off the cuff here?
No,
I'm gonna, I'm
not at all.
I'm going to tell you, one of my all-time favorite started his business in his garage, just like we are in this class, okay? Starting something from scratch with no budget. And also, every time I look in the mirror and I think of what I probably look like, what I think I look like to myself in the mirror, I see this guy. Okay. This is the guy I see when I look in the mirror. I'm like, that's me. That's me. That's just like me. His name was Jim Gennard. And Jim Gennard was a BMX bike rider. And he got an idea because he kept skinning his fingers on his bike handles as he was going to these competitions. And he said, there should be better gloves than these. And he got together a couple dollars. Now, this was a while back in the 70s, right? So he scraped together about 300 bucks, which is about getting like, 1,500 bucks, 2,000 bucks today. You know, 2,000 bucks is a lot of money, but let me tell you something. I do DoorDash with my wife whenever I have a little budget shortfall with my flight school, and I'm like, oh, you know what? I didn't expect that much money. I don't believe in credit. I don't use credit. If I need money, I go and I earn it. And so there we just had an annual inspection for one of my airplanes, and it came in at $2,000 or $3,000 rather, and I thought it was going to be only 2,000. So we had budgeted 2,000, and all of a sudden I needed an extra 1,000. My wife jumped in the car. I jumped in the car. We went and did DoorDash for, a couple weeks and we earned it. We earned $1,000 by delivering food. Okay. That's this guy. Okay. He came up with the money by delivering papers and what have you in 75. He came up with 300 bucks. And believe it or not, the name Oakley was the name of his dog. He's not a super creative guy. He didn't care. I'm naming this thing Oakley after my dog. And he came up with the Oakley grip so that your fingers would not get cut on your bike handles. And he took all that money that he made from selling. How did he sell it? He's almost exactly the same story as Freitag. He took garbage, he sewed it together, he made some glovey things, and then he went to the next BMX meet and the motocrosses, and he sold them at the motocross meet. And he took the money and he took it back home and tried to figure out what other things people might need desperately, including gloves and grips and guards and made more. And he brought them back to the next one. And in 5 years, he came up with the goggles. Okay, he didn't roll out of bed and say, "Let's get goggles and borrow $10,000." He saw what he was good at, and he saw what was needed in his startup network, his porch pilots, his Freitag cool other bike messengers, his friends who were also had jobs and who also thought that you could take plastic and turn it into petroleum. You see the theme of this class? There's a theme. Okay. So Jim came up with the goggles. He sold the goggles. He did well with the goggles. By 83, he turned them into ski goggles. I have a pair. I have a pair right upstairs. Then they turned into the sunglasses. Okay? Turned into the sunglasses. And then the frog skin, the sunglass style, right? That became it. Went public in 95. 20 years. It took him 20 years to make an overnight success. That is what this class is all about. here, let me share. I promised I share a couple of little businesses that I started over the years. Here was a good one. This was one, you'll like this. I was in college and I thought, I had worked in a bunch of catering companies. I knew a lot about food service, and I would call food service socially beneficial. And I was doing food service, and I thought, wow, I like the catering. It's fun. It always stinks to work for somebody else. I think I could come up with my own idea. And so I noticed that a couple catering companies that I had done some work for, did not like doing the alcohol portion of it. And I thought, well, that's strange. Why don't they want to do the alcohol portion of it? Well, I found out later, of course, but they basically told me, yeah, lugging around the alcohol is a pain in the neck. Getting a certified bartender, somebody who knows how to actually make a drink and mix a drink, is hard to do. And now I had worked in every job you can do in a restaurant by the time I was done with college, and I've fallen back on the restaurant industry multiple times over my life, different times of my careers, I should say. Um, Anyway, I knew how to bartend. I had bartended, and I thought, wow, I could get together a bunch of my college friends, and we could put together a company that all we're going to do is the bar to part. In fact, we're not going to touch the food, and we're going to sell our services not only to actual parties and people, retail, but we're going to sell our services to the catering companies because they don't want to do the bar part. So I went to a couple catering companies and they're like, oh, yeah, that's a good idea. And we came up with a name, the Mainline Bar Association. And there's my name, my full name, and my phone number from way back when in Villanova. And so that's what we did. We set ourselves up. And so it's bartenders, servers, and butlers. Well, it only took a couple of parties before we got to one where we show up and it's this fancy schmancy house in Villanova. And I don't know if any of us have ever been to Villanova, but there's some pretty fancy schmancy houses out there. And we go into this one bar, and as I'm setting up my bar, the owner of the house comes over to me and says, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm setting up my bar. You hired us to do the bar." She said, "Oh, yeah, I forgot to tell you this. You can't serve anything that's not clear." I said, "What?" She said, "You can't serve anything that's not clear." I said, there's, there's not a lot of alcohol that's clear. There are some, but there's not many. And she said, "Yeah, you see that rug you're standing on there, that cream color rug? That rug cost $40,000. $40,000. This was in 1988. 40,000. That's like a $200,000 rug. Just think about that. You're standing on a 200. That rug costs more than my house." She said, "Yeah, if anybody spills anything that's not clear on that rug, I'm gonna have to murder you and them." So I put the Bloody Mary mix away. I put the red wine away. I put the white wine away because white wine's not clear. So basically, I served vodka, gin, and ice. And I thought, and then I started thinking about, like, as I'm serving vodka and to people who are beer drinkers, I couldn't serve beer. And some of them are getting a little tipsy, and I started thinking about the liability of this, and I remembered that was right around the time that the police and the government was all getting big in on arresting bartenders for serving people who were drunk. Like, you're supposed to know, like, what am I supposed to test their blood level, and make sure. But they were going after bartenders for people getting drunk and stupidly crashing and killing people. At which you say, okay, maybe I should change. I should change it. So I actually thought, and this is a good example of surprise, right? Surprise. That we talked about last week. So I'm sitting actually in a bar, and it's funny because I was serving alcohol, but I didn't actually drink when I was in college. So I never had any alcohol. So I didn't know what any of these things tasted like. But I was sitting with a friend of mine at a bar, where one of the places where I got the vodka, and I was bringing it back, and we started talking, and I noticed that they have these things there called beer meisters. And I said, and he started just pouring a beer for somebody, and I just kind of struck me. It was very interesting. I was looking at it. So let's go to the pain grid for the because this is the second part of this. So when I first got started, I thought about the cost of catering, and I also thought, like I said, you know what? They need professional bartenders to help the catering companies. And you know what? We could be, I know how to do the bartending. We could do just bartending. It would cost a lot less. Small parties could get us for a fraction of the cost of bringing a full-on caterer in. So we could get professional parties that way. We could be small. We'd be looking for small exclusive party givers and catering companies that didn't want anything to do with it. And that's where the name, the Mainline Bar Association. Now, I'm sitting in this bar and I'm talking to this guy and I'm asking, and I see the Beermeister and I say, wow, that's a really interesting contraption. He said, yeah, it is a pretty interesting contraption, and we actually have to get this thing cleaned once a week by law. And he said, because it gets real dirty. I said, really? That's very interesting. Where does it say that? And he puts me in touch with the license. And he says, yeah, look, so it says the draft beer lines, they actually have to be cleaned every 7 days by somebody who signs off on their paperwork that says I cleaned it. Okay, but there's no certification process for the person who does the cleaning. And I start looking into this thing. I go to the library and I take out a little book here and it shows me how the thing is built. And so you have to take the whole thing apart and you got to get a brush and you got to get inside there. You got to clean up, because what happens is the beer builds up yeast, and the yeast is disgusting and it's really bad for you. But not only that, the actual coils, the lines, the hoses that go from the keg all the way up to the beer thing, it comes with a special little, you need a special little wrench there to undo it. And then you have to hook the lines up to each other to some kind of a pump with some kind of fluid to clean it, to clean it out, some kind of sanitizer. So as I'm sitting there at this bar and I'm thinking about this, and I'm like, wow, how much do you charge? Or how much do they charge when they come here? And he said, oh, they charge, $15. I said, so you don't really care who does it right now. So if I came to you and said, I'll do it for $12, would you come to me? And he said, yeah, absolutely. Let me know when you're in business. I went out and I found a pump. I think I got it at the junkyard for, $20. I got some cleaning fluid, which was basically palm olive dishwashing liquid, and some sanitizer. And up, I was up and running. And it turned out it was much more of like a logistic thing, because so beer coils need to be cleaned. Very easy. The pump, it was less than $50. I had a car, okay, and I knew how to drive. It's very easy to do this. So I actually went to the guy who owned that bar, and I said, "Hey, I'll do it for $12." I said, "You know anybody else? I bet you know somebody, two, three other people that would love to use my services too." And he said, "Oh yeah, no problem. Go talk to Jim next door." Went to Jim next door. So I would set up like five, six, seven, eight bars in one area, and now this was the problem. Bars are super cheap. Okay, so they were glad to throw the other guy under the bus and come to me for a couple of dollar difference, especially since they do it once a week. The second thing is they don't want you interfering with their business. So they don't want you messing around with their beer coils while they're open selling stuff, right? So what they do want you to do is to show up right when the bar closes or right when the bar opens. So I started my day at Friday, basically Friday morning, like Thursday night, and then all of a sudden midnight, and then it's Friday morning. I started my day Friday morning at like 2 o'clock in the morning. So I went to bar after bar after bar from 2 to like 4 or 5, and then I had like a little break, and then I went to like the corner bars, like in Manayunk and like Roxborough and the areas like that have corner bars that open up at 8 o'clock in the morning, and serving beer at 8 o'clock in the morning. And so I'd go to all those, and I get done like around noon, because that was like the downtime, or that's when lunch rush started up on Friday and then into Saturday, Sunday. So I was working Friday night, Friday morning, Saturday morning, Sunday morning, every weekend, and I ended up with like, I don't know, like 50 bars. I was making some pretty good money. So bars need to get their clean coils. I undercut the present cleaners. I even offered them a cash discount, pay as you go. And so who was my customer? Cheap small bars, basically. And I had to I kept the same name and changed the thing around. Now I just kind of crossed out the whole servers and stuff, and I pivoted my business, but it was kind of similar and kind of a good pivot. And I ended up doing that all through college and making plenty of money. What's interesting, I had to dissolve it though, because I actually got a letter. Now, you're famous when you get a letter of cease and desist. I actually got a letter of cease and desist from the actual Pennsylvania Bar Association, because they said, you can't call yourself the Mainline Bar Association. People are going to think you're a lawyer. And I'm like, I'm not a lawyer. I'm cleaning bars. No, you can't do that. So I had to get rid of that. So here's the deal. Okay, so this is where we're going to go here with our library. Okay, I'm going to go back. So you have a log line. You're starting to come up with a log line for your business, right? And my log line for that business was bar association, bar only pros. And I said, you know what? Clean your beer coils uh, from pros. why don't we take a look at this stage of the game before we go too much farther working on our pain grid and actually Google your log line. Actually write your log line out, put it in the Google and see what it comes up with and see if that's actually what it is that you think you are working on. You may want to tweak that at this stage of the game. And then we're going to get into looking at the marketing aspects. And so right now we're going to start looking at finding customers. How do you find the customers? Well, you realize what you're good at, okay? You realize what the problem is, a problem and a need and a problem. You figure out how what you do can fix that. That's your demand. And then who you were doing it for. Okay. Who would need you to do that? Well, this is the whole point here of this starting out with your pitch for your social venture. Okay. The point of the social venture pitch is you're kind of selling people on either uh, uh, being a potential customer, being a potential supplier, or even being a potential partner. Any of the above. Okay. You're going to start with who you are, put your name in there. Why you? Okay. What your log line is and what the call to action is. Come join me or come buy my products or uh, let me know if you're doing something that if you, if you have a bar, a potential customer, or if you have a cleaning solution and you can sell it to me. You're doing it that way. So marketing, when you're an entrepreneur, and you have to think about this, who is your customer? And that was our whole point of the last chapter. The customer is not just people buying stuff from you. It's people who buy into what you're doing. So everybody that's in your startup network, that's going into your startup network, they're all kind of customers in a way. Even if they're not buying something from you, they're going to know people that could buy stuff from you. And they're going to know people that do stuff that you could use to help you. That is why marketing is simple. It's a matter of finding anybody who's going to respond to your log line. All right, are you ready? This is the first. No, are you ready? This is going to get a little tricky. This is a two-part. Let me say that again. This is a two-part attendance pop quiz. Two parts. Here is the first part. Write down the number 5. All right, we'll come back to that. All right, so marketing. All we're doing here is identifying, anticipating, and satisfying our customer needs profitably. That is all. That is the definition. But a product is more than just physical design characters. It is all of the things that it encompasses. It is all of the smiley face that goes around in the thing. Now, this is very important. Okay, this is the pain grid. The pain grid for this class is doing a feasibility of something that is reasonable, okay? Something that you could actually do. So if you think that you can actually do a solar car, okay, that you have some wherewithal to do that yourself, fine, okay? But you really got to prove that that's reasonable, okay? All over the feasibility study, it says reasonable, reasonable, reasonable. Uses reasonable numbers, uses reasonable assumptions, uses reasonable in-class suggestions and ideas. This is the class about starting a lemonade stand, okay? If you're going to tell me I'm going to roll out of bed and tomorrow morning somebody's going to give me a loan for $10 million because I'm a college student and because I have a great idea to save the universe with a solar powered time travel machine, that's not really realistic. Okay. And so when I look at the feasibility studies at the end of the semester, I'm going to be looking for that. And in this class, we talked about affordable loss. And what do we say is not affordable loss? Owing people money. What do we call somebody who gives you money as an investor? That's called your boss. Okay. Is that feasible if you have a boss for you to start a business? That's not very realistic. Okay. So get those things out of your mind for this particular class. What do you have now? Who do you know now? That's what we're talking about. In fact, one of my favorite philosophers of all time, Seneca, tells us luck is what happens when preparation meets opportunity. Luck is what happens when preparation makes opportunity. So, what you have now, how that fixes the pain, the problem. Now, what does your product do? How is it going to be better? What does this mean for them, the people that are acolytes, the people in your startup network? Who would buy it? Who would actually write a check for this thing? Who all would influence that person writing the check? This is what's so important. The pain describes your customer. And that brings us to chapter 8 in the book, understanding and attracting your customers. Well, there's a lot to know there. Unfortunately, knowing who your customers are, that's not enough. You got to understand the why. Why? What are you fixing for them? What's the project? Why you? The value of any product or service is a result of its ability to meet the customer's priorities. Don't think about getting to know your customers and to give the customers what they want. No, you got to find their sweet spots. And that brings us to this concept of demographics and understanding a specific target market. Okay, so a target market. If you were going to explain something to somebody and your log line was, I know this is a crazy example, but if your log line was girl meets boy, boat sinks, right? Okay, we said that was the log line for the Titanic. And your customers were Parisians from Paris. They were from France. Were French speakers. No, that is not your segment. That is not your segment. Your log line must be Fille rencontre garçon et vient de bateau. Okay, that's French for girl meets boy, boat sinks. Et vient de bateau. The boat sinks. And now you are talking to Parisians. So when we talk about my flight school, okay, you could say, hey, look, I have a flight school. I've owned it for a bunch of years. And what are the reasons? Okay, we'll get into some of these things later on. But my supplies, I have a plane. I know pilots. I know students. I know people who could help me put together my web presence. And we have an Uber model basically for flight instructors, right? We get private contractor flight instructors. Who would be my customer? And you say to yourself, well, who is the customer? Who would I be teaching to fly? You say, well, I have had end users from age 13 to 75. Okay. Like my oldest person coming to start flying was 75 years old. My youngest was 13 years old. All the genders you could think of, all the ethnicities you could think of, every person you could think of. But am I going to talk to a 13-year-old? Is the 13-year-old really my customer? They have to be into it. They have to be an acolyte. Yeah. Are they writing the check? No. Who's writing the check? Mom is writing the check, right? Mom is writing the check. Am I going to talk to a mom of a 13-year-old the same way I'm going to talk to a, let's say, a 55-year-old woman or a 55-year-old man that drives a Ferrari and loves the adventure of flying their own plane and wants to go real fast? No, absolutely not. Mom, I'm going to talk to you like this. This is mom, okay? This is mom with the baby cub, the 13-year-old on the back. Mom, I am safe, very safe. I'm a safe pilot, and I'm here to teach your son or your daughter some safety in flying, some independence certainly, and some science and all the wonderful things. But more important than anything, I am safe. I'm going to teach them safety. Okay, I am safe. I went to Flight Safety Academy. Am I going to say the same thing to the 55-year-old Ferrari driver? Probably not so much. Yeah, hey, I'm safe, but man, this is fun. You think going fast in a Ferrari is fun? Let me show you how fast you can really go in my plane. So that's important. It's important to understand segments and targets as you're looking at the potential people who are interested in your customer. And you can find all the stuff out right in the library that I showed you in the beginning. So in the book, they gave you a really good example here of the kinds of beneficiaries you're talking about. So in the one they were explaining here about the food bank, okay, you've got direct beneficiaries, but then you also have indirect beneficiaries. So that the 13-year-old is going to definitely be benefited by learning how to fly, but they're not really writing the check. So you have to take that into consider as well. So we talk about who's going to buy it, and then are you going to segment? And when you think about a market and partitioning a market, there are some sections that may not be the best ones because there's not enough of them, or they can't afford it, or it's not something that fits in their lifestyle. So you got to understand common needs as well when you're looking at a bunch of customers. And you can identify and measure segments that are different. They have to have something a little bit different. And usually it's just the way you talk to them. It's just a communications issue, which is why I gave you the French and English version. Um, but sometimes it makes no sense to develop more than one market at one time. It makes more sense to just stick with the biggest group or find your niche within the smaller group. Willingness to pay, value proposition, ability to pay. Are they identifiable? Okay, identifiable. So, for instance, if we were doing the same thing with the talking in French versus talking in English in Montreal, everybody speaks both. Doesn't matter. So this is our effectuation process. This is the whole class. We start with, hey, I'm going to Do we start with, hey, I'm going to borrow some money? No. We're going to start with who I am, what I know, who I know, the goals that I can do. We're going to interact with all the people we know, our startup network. Then we may have new members of our startup network. Okay. And there, that means we have new means. With new means, I know more people. I know more stuff. I have more abilities. And that's going to change. It's called the effectuation cycle. Most important, paramount to this is this power interest grid that we're working on right now. We started on it in the beginning just for ourselves personally, and now we're going to branch out as we go forward into people interested in the business that you're going to actually be working on, which some of them are the same people. Who will do what? Right? That's a good question. And the value chain is everybody that's in there. And that's why this is so incredibly, your social venture pitch is so important. You have no idea. There's 50 people in this class, 50 different people. You think that one of them could be doing something that could help you either by buying or finding somebody who can buy or offering you something that you can sell or add to what it is that you're doing. It's the value chain. This is your value chain. It's called Management 215. Okay. It's very important. Then we're going to streamline the value chain as we go along. Okay. As we go through it, we're going to write out a plan, how we're going to do the plan, and we're going to streamline the original one, which is just people that you know that care about you personally, into the ones that can make it happen. That can make this whole thing happen. So, how are we going to describe this? How are we going to describe it to whom? Their pain, your solution, why you, why it's important to them, and that's where we're headed with this whole thing. So, remember this, business and by extension, entrepreneurship is never about technology. It's about what happens right now in front of an audience. Think about this. They sell water, okay? Entrepreneurs sell water. It's something you can get for free from a faucet, okay? And you've got to decide, are you a business or a charity? If you're a business, you make your market, you sell your product. If you're a charity, you go to the government and start begging, okay? The question is, what pain are you assuaging? What's the story we absolutely need to hear? We hate being sold to, okay? We're bombarded by it. What's the truth? What is wondrous about what it is that your social venture is? And because remember, we react emotionally first, always emotionally first. Then we process it by the intellect. You cannot change how someone thinks without making them feel something first. I promise you. And a great man one time said, if you want to make beautiful music, you got to play the black and white notes together. So we said business and by extension, entrepreneurship, it's dynamic. It constantly changes. In fact, the word perfection is meaningless in entrepreneurship. Absolutely meaningless. And then we've got some more questions we'll start talking about as we move forward about how to position our product, what makes ours different from others. We'll get more into that. But listen, a great brand is in it for the long haul. It knows itself. It does not have to be flashy. The brand is owned by the customer, not by you. Okay, are you ready? Here's the second part of our attendance quiz. You already wrote down the first number. I gave it to you before. If you're just tuning in here and didn't watch the beginning, you're missing it. You got to go back. Write down the first number. Now write down this second number. The second number is the number 4. All right. So now how do we size a market? Is it wondrous? All these questions I asked you. Well, let's not worry about that just yet. Okay. What we're going to look at is us, who we know, and how we're going to put it together. Now, here is it. We're just about done here. 10 more seconds left. Here is the attendance pop quiz for today. The 2 numbers that I gave you, you wrote them both down. Send me the 2 numbers and the sum of the 2 numbers. That is all. Okay, now, if you need a calculator, I can tell you that if you add the 2 numbers, they come up to 9. But I want to see both numbers and the solution. So, those of us watching the recording, any questions that you have, shoot me an email right away. Okay? Anything I can answer for you and help you with, I'm here to help. And I hope to see you sometime in the future. But I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to turn off the recording here. So thank you for watching the recording.